Well, why is it that sometimes traditional approaches to change fail? And are there some better approaches that we can take? And what does science have to say about all this? So many questions to answer here today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. This is for you, the young and emerging leader who wants to level up your leadership game. Maybe you've just started a leadership position and you want to improve your own personal leadership brand. I am Jon Goehring, joined as always here by Coach Jim Johnson, and we brought along another leader who is actually an author, a coach, and has a lot of great things going for him. So let's dive right in today and dive into some science-backed strategies to transform your brain and more. Coach, go ahead and introduce our guest.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've got a chance to connect with Michael Lopez, our guest today. I want to share a little bit about him and then welcome to the show. So, Michael has delivered results for clients across multiple industries and business models. As a student of the human industry, Michael uses his experience and passion for the science and practice of behavior change to design innovative change strategies. He brings a diverse leadership style forged from a blend of business, civil service, military, and athletic experience which he uses to accelerate performance for leaders and teams of all types. Prior to forming Michael J. Lopez Consulting, Michael worked as a profit brand strategy. Before this, he spent time as a managing director of both KPMG and EY after 13 years with Booz Allen Hamilton. In addition, Michael spent 2 years as the director of innovation and strategy at Smith's Interconnect, a global diversified industrial products company. He began his career as an officer in the U.S. intelligence community. Michael earned his MBA from George Mason University and his BA from Occidental College. And I know he was also an athlete in college. And Michael also is the author of a book that I've had the pleasure to read called Change. Here it is for our YouTube watchers. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And I know we're going to get into it. Without further ado, Michael Lopez, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thanks for having me, both of you. This is great. Really excited to jump in and talk about change and coaching and leadership and all of it. So, really, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive into it saying because I was an athletic coach and I know you are as well. And so I'm curious because now I do a lot of presentations around the country to both educational groups, but also like my next presentation is to a business, and I've done building team culture and leadership. So I'd be curious of your thoughts because you do a lot of consulting and speaking as well as coaching football. What are the similarities in leadership that you've learned that you've been able to transfer in both worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I first just let me say that every good thing I've learned about being a leader and a teammate came from playing football, playing college football, and being a coach in the years since then. Team sports are the place where those lessons are taught. They're learned. They're earned in the struggle of the big and small moments. And so for me, I one of the reasons I started this company and kind of left big consulting was I've always been using those strategies, the same strategies I use to motivate athletes or to build a team or to win a game. The same strategies I use when I lose a game, right? Watching the tape, this, coach, right? It's the first thing you do, right? What could I have done differently? And so I was using all of those strategies in my work and telling stories about moments like you do. And so, it all starts from there for me. My teammates are my brothers. My head coach from college, I just talked to him yesterday. He's given me some of the best advice. He's like a father to me, right? So for me, this fraternity of football that I've been fortunate to be a part of, and this fraternity of coaching has just been such a gift, and it just all starts with that for me, and that'll never change.
Mm. Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about your style as a leader and as a coach, because we all have a leadership brand. I'm reading a great book by former guest Marty Osborne. It talks about our leadership brand, and I know there's multiple leadership brands that make good leaders. Not all leaders are the same, but what is your leadership brand, and how have you found that to be effective in your coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I on my website, I've put this down, and it's sort of the ethos that I live by. Is sort of this three commitments uh, uh, position that I take, right? And my first commitment is to help people into uncomfortable but necessary experiences, conversations, moments, because that's where growth happens, right? The second one is to give them tools to work through that experience, and the third is to lead by example. And I tell my athletes, I tell executives, I tell my kids, I will never ask you to do something that I haven't done or am not willing to do myself. And that's how I show up as a coach. Growth is hard, and I think anyone, and being in the consulting world, a lot of times we talk about change is easy, and it's not, because if it was, everyone would do it, right? Excellence is not easy. If it was, everyone would do it. And so for me, it's about understanding, my leadership brand is all about an action oriented leadership by example support model, which is, I'm here to help you grow, which means it's going to be tough, but I'm going to be right next to you as you go through it. And I've been through it, and I'm still going through it in different ways. And so, leading by example for me is just, it's just such an important attribute. And I'm still learning and growing and trying new things and struggling and failing and starting again. And so, I've just always wanted people on my teams, my clients, my kids, my teammates, my athletes to know that I've been there. And I've not just been there, but I'm going through it too, just in different ways.
Yeah, you said some powerful things I really can relate because I used to always tell my players, if it was easy to be a champion, everyone would be one,
Yeah.
right? So
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
so you got to go be willing to make the commitment and go through the challenging processes. So I'm going to dig in. I've got a few questions about the book, and I'll start with this one. You had three questions to change people's lives. Can you delve
Mm.
into those questions? I think they're pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah. When not, not to give away too much of the book, I've written about this, and I shared it because I truly believe that these three questions, in their simplicity, can change anything about your life. But you have to answer them honestly, and I think that's the trick, right? The first one is pretty simple. How have I done something in the past? Whatever it is that maybe you want to change. How have I approached a problem, a relationship, a challenge, a setback, whatever it may be, right? How have I done something in the past? And the answer to that question is about understanding your patterns and really understanding the triggers, the reactions, the responses, right? And there's a difference, right? A reaction is not a response, and those two things are different. So, really investigating honestly the answer to that question. The second question is, how has that served me? And notice I didn't say what was the outcome. And I think the reason I asked that question differently is because the answer to that question is, where did I grow? Where did I maybe atrophy? Um, where did I struggle in the experience in ways that were, sort of reducing growth? Where are ways that maybe unintended consequences happened that I didn't realize that I benefited from, right? And, the answer to that question, it really requires that someone outside of you give you some feedback, right? You have
Mm.
to, it's sort of watching the tape, right? And saying, wow, what I didn't realize that happened in that experience, right? So we're so consumed with our own experience that we often miss so many things that happen to us and outside of us. The third question is then the kind of fun part, right? How might I do it differently? And that question also, if you have a good coach, you have a peer, you have a mentor, and someone that says, okay, what could change based on what you learned about your investigation of your own behavior, right? Because we're so focused on outcomes, because we're so focused on the result, these questions are designed to help you understand your patterns and your process. And the last one is about the possibility, right? What could be different? And for me, those three questions have served me in my life in really tough moments. Maybe just to tell a quick story, I got fired from a client one time. They actually deactivated my badge when I showed up to the client site the next day.
Oh, wow.
I had a personal difference of opinion with one of my clients who was going back on his word to a number of other clients, and we had a disagreement. This guy was a tough guy, and I played a little bit of hardball with him, and he played hardball with me. And I forgot that he had the power to just say, "We don't want you on this team anymore."
Mm-hmm.
And the investigation of that experience, looking at the moments of, wow, how did I show up in there? I was really kind of militant, right? I was really combative, and I didn't think about my relationship with him, talking through the things that we needed to talk through. I was morally correct. I always say that this wasn't a mistake in values; it was a mistake in execution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I learned more from that experience than at any point in my career, right? And so I was able to step back and remove the emotion of the moment and follow the pattern of those three questions. So, they're wonderfully simple to ask, difficult to answer questions.
And I know something else that you talk about in your book is a lot about adaptability too. And that kind of plays into this conversation too, that it's not so much about the results, but if you can simply become a more adaptable person, what does your book show about that might be more of the key than to changing those results?
Look, we are the most adaptable species that has ever existed on this planet, right? And I think it's important for people to understand what that means, right? So adaptation in the clinical definition means the changes an organism makes to become better suited to its environment, right? And we all lived through probably the largest interruption of our environment that we've experienced in a generation, which was COVID, right? And we all know now the ways in which we've changed, not just that we use Zoom more, we're sitting on a Zoom call now, but the way in which we've adapted the work from home experience, right? Understanding how that changes your behavior in terms of all the other side effects of that experience. And so it's important to understand that adaptation is not just doing something different. It's actually the resultant effects in my behavior, in my beliefs, in my patterns that come from shifting into new ways of being, thinking, and existing, right? And so that's I think the first important principle to understand. You have the ability to change just outside of your DNA, you have the ability to change just about anything about yourself. And we often forget that because it's hard, we we don't execute that experience, right? So for me, that concept is so important because the other side of that coin is, in the clinical definition, if you're not improving and growing, you're going backwards, right?
Yeah.
Stagnation is not just the act of staying put or going backwards. It's the act of staying put. It's the act of not growing. And so for me, those concepts are just central to this idea that you have the ability to change and you have the ability for your entire life. I say this sort of tongue in cheek. I hope we all learn something new the day before they close the casket, right? You have that ability. You just have to step into the process.
A great point. Well, Michael, yeah, I was thinking that is because I want to delve in. One of your other books behind you for our YouTube followers is Outlive, a book that I've
Yeah.
also read. And one of the things that I always kid my good friend here, John, is the first person you got to lead is, of course, yourself. So talk a little bit about your way that you've been able, because I know one of the things you said that I felt was really powerful is one of my 7 leadership keys is lead by example. So is leading an example, what do you do to take care of you first so you can be a more effective leader?
Yeah, look, there is an enduring principle of humanity which I think is important, right? The only person you can change is yourself. Uh, that is and always will be true. You cannot change another person, and you'll never have the ability to change it. You can influence and guide and suggest and recommend, but much like our kids, right, our children, they're great observers to the things that you do, and they mimic those patterns. And so, for me, leading by example and showing up this way is the best way to demonstrate to others that these strategies work. And so for me, I never want to be a hypocrite. Hypocrisy is one of my least favorite things in the world. And so, starting with that idea, which is a mindset of I have a responsibility. If I'm going to talk about these things, I'm going to write about these things, I'm going to expect these things in others, then I have to do it too. And for me, that's really incredibly motivating. In terms of other strategies, I exercise a lot, and I make sure I'm 51. I have a small baby and grown kids, and I need to be around for a long time. So for me, that experience is all about putting your mask on first and knowing that I've got to stay around and take care of myself. I'm surrounded by amazing people. I have an incredible wife. I have incredible children. We're a blended family, and I have an ex and we get along and she's fantastic. I have incredible teammates that I talk to every day. And this idea that our social network, our social infrastructure, it's one of the most powerful environments we can cultivate. And so, not being alone in that experience, in that journey, is really important.
Mm.
And, I think the last thing I would say back to this leading by example is I enjoyed the challenge. I've self-induced a lot of stress in my life that helps me in the harder moments. And so, you train your body, you do push-ups, you run, you do hard workouts, you can train your mind, and that's doing hard things. And every hard thing you do that you succeed through, and even if you fail, if you ask the three questions, for me, everything's a learning experience. And so I just really try not to get too high or too low. I give myself what I call the 12-hour rule. I have 12 hours to kick rocks, and then it's time to move on, right? You got to figure out how to get to the next thing. And so those are just things I try. I'm not perfect. But yeah, those, it all starts with those three things, right? Taking care of yourself, exercise, a great network of people around you, and a mindset that says, you can get through this. What can you learn and how do you grow?
Hey, I just got to delve in one last thing because I know most people know this, but you can tell from our country that most people aren't doing this. Give a little bit of advice because you say you exercise. I do too. I don't miss, and I have my own strategies, but I'm curious, what are your strategies? Because that's the one thing I don't have time to exercise. And I say, well, if you don't have time to exercise, your life is going to live a lot shorter. So
Yeah.
do you have any strategies you do that you could give wisdom to people that you have the famous, I don't have time?
Well, I think, look, it's tough, right? We all contend with a lot of obligations in life. And so I'm not here to minimize the effort that's required to do that. I think the first principle is something is better than nothing, right? And I think that's important for people to understand. Our bodies, the human body was designed to move. And so it's really important for us to understand that movement is an important pattern that also feeds the brain. And so there is a bidirectional relationship between our brain and our bodies. And, this idea of use it or lose it, it's really important in the sense that if you stop moving, your brain thinks that the signals that it's been sending for, all sorts of athletic or, movement-based patterns aren't necessary. And it shuts those down and they get even harder. And
Mhm.
so when you move, you train your brain to say, wow, I need to move. I need to be ready for this pattern. And so that's important. You're not just moving your body, you're actually feeding your brain. Um, the second thing I would say, in terms of an advice is that short bouts of very focused exercise, even 10 minutes, particularly higher intensity exercise, are incredibly beneficial for your immune system, for your state of mind. I have some of the best thoughts and the best, people talk about sort of get the best thoughts in the shower. Even short, walking up a flight of stairs 4 times quickly has incredible benefits on your ability to focus, all of these things. And so instead of maybe thinking about it as a burden, think about it as an input, right? Hey, I've got a hard problem I'm working on. Go hike the stairs 5 times. You'll be surprised at what happens, right? And so movement is medicine. I tell people when you're sad, move. When you're happy, move. When you don't know what to do, move. right? It's a big piece, of this equation. The last thing I'd say is particularly for older folks, right? I'm on the other side of 50, so, halfway, maybe more. Hopefully I get to 100. That's my goal. Resistance training is so important, and putting your body under that kind of stress. The science is even more compelling, particularly for folks in their 70s, 80s. It's never too late. Pick up a weight, find a way to put your body and your bones and your muscles under some kind of stress. Again, even small amounts are really, really impactful.
Great
Well,
point.
you hit right on the thing that I hate the most, and that is resistance training. You just had to bring that up. I love to run, Michael. I love to bike, and I just hate resistance training. But it's so
Well, let me
important.
say, look, I want to make a point. I talk about this in the book, and one of the strategies is about this idea of embracing stress. And
Mm,
to put it simply, you will not grow, you will not change unless you have a better relationship with stress. The stress response is an essential and enduring element of the human experience, right? Stress was designed to make us move, full stop. And stress doesn't know if you're moving because you're motivated, or you're moving because you're scared, or it's a bear, or it's a hard presentation, right? The stress response doesn't know that. But the truth is, look, bones grow under stress. They get harder, they get stronger. Muscles grow under stress. Your brain also learns under stress. And so it's required, right? That experience of being uncomfortable, the adrenaline response is what helps us focus. It's what draws our attention to the moment. And so I know it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary, right? And so, Jon, you're being sort of funny about I don't like resistance training, but resistance is a central component of all change, whether it's your body or your brain, right? It's going to feel difficult. And so I just try to help people lean into that. And for me, exercise is so important because it's an at bat, right? It's a rep for this idea of what it feels like to be intensely uncomfortable and then come out the other side and go, wow, I did that, right? That's a confidence builder.
yeah. Oh, for sure. And it's an interesting thing that you brought up, stress, having a good relationship with stress, because a lot of times we want to run from stress because of how it makes us feel. And sure, it's uncomfortable, but stress is actually a good biological response, right? It's what keeps us safe. Without stress, I don't know if we would live. We would die
Exactly.
because we would do something stupid and not be worried about it. So I know you have 6 science-based strategies in your book, Change. Talk about why science is so important to you and having that background to back up your strategies rather than just
Yeah.
talking about these, because we all know, this may be true from science or just from culture, but why is that scientific angle so important for you?
Well, I think it helps to depersonalize maybe some of the thoughts we have internally about, why should I do this? I can't do it. I don't have the willpower. I don't understand why this works or why it's important. And I feel like giving people information, it's a great empowerment tool to help kind of both demystify understanding, but then sort of taking away some of the negative self-talk that comes up when we have a setback, right? Well, I'm a failure. I can't do this. I can't do that. Look, one of the things I talk about in the book is this idea of mistakes, right?
Mhm.
Mistakes are probably the single largest contributor to the opportunity for neuroplasticity that we can have, right? Because it signals to the brain that something needs to change. So rather than thinking about a mistake as some kind of epic failure that I'll never recover from, it's an opportunity, right? So I think the science gives people a way to move away from this internal struggle of dialogue and negative self-talk, and gives them an understanding of the mechanism, right? And I think when you understand the mechanism, well, now I can start to direct it, right? I can start to point it, right? Like stress, right? Rather than thinking about stress as some sort of thing to be avoided, and this idea that stress, look, it's an autonomic response, right? You don't control it. You can self-induce it, and that's a big strategy that I talk about, right? So the more I induce stress, the more sort of agency I feel like I have over it. But if I know the mechanism and I understand the science, well, then I can point it. I can start to get in front of things and use them to help accomplish my goals rather than sort of be in the passenger seat, right? And sort of feel like these things are happening to me. The last thing I would say about why the science is important is, look, we know more about the brain than at any point in our history. And a lot of people are leaning into concepts that they intuitively understand, but I think now there's some sort of proof, right? There's this idea that this is not some, pop culture moment of, just thinking positively and that's just all it's about, right? It's not to say that thinking positively is not important. You should do that. But
Right.
but now I think it sort of gives us some evidence that even in the moment, while we might not feel like we're hitting our goals, and that's a big part of this experience, right? You sort of talking about exercise, right? You don't lose 30 pounds from one workout, right? You got to do it over and over and over again. Is that in the absence of maybe understanding where the outcomes are going to happen, I've got some evidence now that when I take these actions, they are working. And I think that's important to help people keep going.
That's a great point. Well, you mentioned it, and it is ironically, I was going to delve into this in my next question. So, take us through working with, it could be your football team or
Yeah.
a client in the business world of because you had some really interesting ideas on goal setting, and it's
Yeah.
something that's been studied in a lot of different angles. But tell us a story of you working with somebody to help them with their goals.
Well, goals are wonderful. Let me say that. We all have goals. We should have goals. There's nothing wrong with having goals. The challenge is the way that we design goals and we define goals, right? We tend to define goals in terms of outcomes, right? Losing 30 pounds, making $1 million, getting a new job, winning the championship. All of those things are our vision of ourself into the future, where we have this idea that on the other side of this accomplishment is the best version of us or some moment where I'll feel great. And we all do that in all sorts of ways. The challenge with that we just talked about is that you don't accomplish those things in one action, right? They take time. And so because they take time, we get demotivated in the process of trying to chase that outcome because it takes too long, it takes too many repetitions. I'm not seeing the results, right? We sort of talk about this in the book. January 19th is Quitter's Day. That's the day most
Mm.
people give up on their New Year's resolutions, right? Not even 3 weeks. And so the first thing is to understand that shifting away from outcomes, I sort of say this sort of funnily to my clients, right? And they use KPIs, key performance
Mhm.
indicators, or some ROI number. We want to save $10 million. And I get it, right? But I tell them quite oftenly, stop measuring that. Stop measuring and putting your temperature gauge up of how much did we save today. Instead, and this is the second point, is understand what are the inputs to the performance I need that enable the outcome to be possible, right? If I wanted to go from 11 seconds in the 100 meter to 10.5, I wouldn't just tell you to run faster. Sure, that's the goal, right? We'd measure your start time. We'd talk about your foot turnover. We'd work on your flexibility. We'd work on your strength, right? We would understand all of the variables that go into faster performance, and we'd execute actions to get those inputs to be better. And that's what I help companies do, right? Hey, we make slow decisions. Well, okay, how are you delegating, right? Do you have an understanding of how people make decisions, and are they empowered to do that? Do they have that skill set? And what does that look like? Then you'll make faster decisions, right? And so this first part is understanding outcomes are important, but you've got to really understand the inputs to the process. That's just such a huge component of understanding how to change performance. You don't change performance by putting people in a headlock and telling them to run faster. You help them understand the inputs to what makes them move faster. The last thing I'll say, and then maybe, then I would love to get your feedback, is we also define goals a lot of times in terms of things we want to avoid. And what we need to do is think about things we want to approach, right?
Mm.
This happens all the time in our personal life, right? Don't eat the donut, right? I want to stop eating junk food. Well, all now I'm thinking about is junk food, right? I see junk food everywhere, as opposed to someone that says, I want to live a healthy lifestyle. Well, now I'm orienting towards the thing I'm approaching, which is an opportunity to make choices that are in keeping with my values instead of denying myself the thing that I want to do all the time, right? And that's much more motivating. We know that in the science of motivation that when we're striving, when we're chasing things, we are far more motivated than we're running from things. And so that's another big piece of the goal redefinition experience.
That's a great point because, the one thing that we really emphasize with our teams is yes, we did set goals. We had team goals. I met with our players. One of the things I always mention to the leaders is that I think it's really important that you meet with your people one-on-one and understand what their individual goals and how do they synchronize with the team goals, right?
Mm.
Because if you don't have that in a team situation, things are going to go awry. But it is like if our goal, for almost all teams, if you're trying to win some type of championship.
Yeah.
But then I always talk, the famous Wizard of Oz, are we staying the process on the yellow brick road, or are we rearing off in the woods? And because, and that's something I think as a leader, I always call the leaders got to be the CRO, the chief reminding officer, that you got to be getting them back on
Yeah.
the yellow brick road. So
Yeah, patience and repetition. And I love what you said there, coach. And this idea that the goal is the effort I deliver in pursuit of the goal. That's really the
Mm.
goal, right? That's what
yeah.
I tell my athletes, there's only two things you can control in life, your attitude and your effort.
Mhm.
Everything else comes from outside of you. And so I tell executives the same thing. I had a mid-level manager, one of my clients about a year and a half ago, of all places, working at a nuclear power station, 800 people at a power station. They were one of the most underperforming stations in the US, right? There's about
Wow.
100 stations. They were like 92 or something. There's like actual ranking system. And one of the things they were trying to do is turn it around. And I'm happy to report that in the year that we were spending time, they literally went from like worst to first, and really, really proud of the work that team did. One of the managers was talking to me, and we were working on delegation. That's why I brought up that example. And he said, I'm meeting with my team. He goes, but we're just not being effective enough. I'm helping my supervisors understand what they need to do. And I said, well, what are you doing? He goes, well, I meet with them every day, before the day and after the day. And we plan what's happening. We talk about what we could have done better. And he goes, I've got a couple some of my folks are getting it. There's two folks that are really just still struggling. So we're still working on it. And I said, you're doing it. That's the you are achieving the goal, which is teaching people through example and conversation and feedback how to grow. And I'm like, don't worry about the fact that two of them aren't getting it yet. They will, right? It might be a little slower, but they'll get it. And that was helpful for him because he felt like a failure, right? He's like, I
Mm.
got five people, three are good, two aren't. And what was he doing? He was staring at the two people that weren't getting it, number one, and as opposed to the three that were.
Yeah.
And he was focusing on the outcome, right? Well, they're not there yet. But I said, no, focus on are you still meeting with them? Are you still coaching them? And get, yeah, okay, then you're doing it. You're achieving the goal, right? And those are important shifts that a lot of people in companies don't make because they're so focused on the result.
Yeah. So process related goals versus those results related goals. So important. And one of our previous guests said it well too. He said something about pulling back the how layers. So you want a result. Well, how? And then usually you need about three how layers, three how questions. And that's a word
Yeah.
I heard you use too, Michael, is three questions to get back to, oh, I just need to make more calls or whatever
Yeah.
the case may
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
I know who's like the main client that you work with in your coaching.
Well, I think it's, I've worked, as you said in the introduction, coach, I've worked with companies of all kinds, and all sizes and all industries. I always tell people that as long as you have human beings in your company, I can help you change. My relationships are with the C-suite. A lot of times, the CEOs and folks that are trying to really change their company trajectory, right? I have a client project I'm getting ready to start, also happens to be in the energy space. And one of the states, he's the CEO of the operating company for a state, and he has got a leadership team of like 10, 12 people. They've been together for a long time. And he said to me, they understand the job that exists today, and they're very good at running the business as it exists right now. But we're at the front end of probably the most explosive growth that we'll ever see, and they don't understand how to do that job. I need your help moving this team, not just in terms of their perspective, but in their ability to shift and help enable those around them, the next layer of the business, to be in a position to go capture that moment, right? And so those are things that that I spend my time with. I've got a client that's in the healthcare space, and they purchased a number of companies over the years, and they never had a set of corporate values, right? They never decided, who are we, right? They just had a bunch of businesses all clumped together, which were doing very well, a billion-dollar company. But they were like, wow, we're starting to see the effects of maybe a lack of affiliation because everybody's just kind of doing their own thing, right? We want to get bigger. We want to be more connected. We want to feel that these 80,000 people have a sense of identity to what we're building. And so help me do that. How do I do that, right? How do I bring that to life? So yeah, I love what I do. I am a practitioner. One of the reasons I started my independent company was as a big consultant. Nothing against those companies; they're great. I do the work, right? I'm in the meetings, I'm in the moments. I design the workshops, right? I'm on the field, coach, right? I'm in the I'm on the hardwood, right? I'm there in those sessions because I think it's really about high leverage moments, right? And you can't do that from a distance, and you can't outsource that. And so yeah, I just, every day is a competition, every day is an opportunity, it's a practice, and I really do love what I do.
That's great. Well, Michael, I have one final question. I know John probably has, I think, a couple things to wrap up, but we really appreciate your insights today. Again, reminder of the book. I've got it here too, Change. And but my question is, let's go back. You're working with a leader that's starting with a new team.
Mm.
And something you've talked a little bit about, but let's delve in. What would be a couple ideas you would give them on helping them start to build, like my next presentation is how to build a championship culture, and I have
Mm.
some keys I'm going to share with this group of business people.
Yeah.
Is so what would advice would you give if you narrow down, because there's a lot to culture, right? So but if you were to narrow down and give a couple bits of advice to get them off to the right start, what would you share with them?
Look, Peter Drucker famously said years ago, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I am a co-signer of that
Yeah.
concept. And for me, it's all about the culture of an organization. And as a result, and I would say that this is the first principle, is that that team has to be the one that defines who they are. And I think a lot of CEOs come in, a lot of big leaders come in, and the first thing they think about, see our previous conversation about goals, is what do we need to accomplish, right? How big is the target? And then they jump into how are we going to do that? And what I tell leaders is your job is not to decide that. Your job is to help the team define who we are, and then let them decide what we need to accomplish. And then if you're really savvy about it, the next layer down in the business should be about how do we get that done? Because we know, and again, this is the science of motivation, is that we own what we create, right? And so I need, as a leader, to not hand people their identity and the goals. I need to give them the environment where they create them and feel a sense of attachment to
Right.
those principles, right? The more I create attachment to those ideas, the more willing and more motivated I am to go chase them, right? So maybe using the example of the nuclear power station, they had a million metrics that they get measured by. We helped them identify 5 shifts, 5 behaviors that they needed to adjust, and they were a part of that experience, right? And maybe to kind of tell the story of what happened there and come back to your question, when we started with them, there's like 16 metrics that these stations use to kind of gauge performance. 15 of them were yellow, one of them was green, many of them trending downward. By the time we got done, 15 of them were green, only one was yellow, and 10 of them were green for the first time in the history of the station. And never once did I tell them to go do that, right? They decided this is who we are, this is who we want to become, and they did it, right? And so I think as a new coach, new leader coming into an organization, resist the urge to set the goals for them and instead create an environment where we can decide who we are, who we want to be. And then the second thing is give people a voice in that experience and then help them design the goals. Once you do that, I think the third piece then is help those leaders understand how to work down in the organization to allow the people that are really the execution arm of whatever company you're a part of, the people that have to do the work, also give them a voice in designing how do we get there? What's the path, right? And to maybe use the military example, right? Generals and admirals and colonels, they're there to set the strategy, right? It's the captains and the lieutenants that are the ones that decide how to go take that action. And again, that's incredibly motivating for people to have agency on designing the path. And so for me, it all starts with that. Who are we? What do we need to accomplish and how do we get there? If you're a great leader, follow that structure and give your teams the ability to answer those questions and really own their own destiny.
Wow.
Thank you.
I'm shocked at how fast these conversations go, Michael, because it's a good conversation when you look at the time and you go, wow, we've been talking for how long? We've learned a lot from you. And I think there's a lot more to learn too. That's the sad part that we can't just
I
have
appreciate
you
that.
here all day. But your book, Change Six Science Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior. It's available up on Amazon, I know. Where else can we find that? Where else can we find out more about you and learn more about these strategies?
Yeah, the book's available on Amazon, Ingram, Barnes and Noble, all the normal retailers that you can get books from. And so would really appreciate folks checking that out. It's getting good reviews, and I'm just super proud of the opportunity to put that out there. And I hope it makes a difference in people's lives. I wrote this book about the individual. I started to write it about companies, and I realized I need to take a step back. So it's really for everyone. I'm working on another book that will be about organizations, and so that's coming soon. My website's a great place to start, michaeljlopez.coach. You can find the book there. I also, you can find all my other socials. I do also a weekly LinkedIn Live series. I'm a top voice on LinkedIn, which I'm incredibly proud of, and I do a Top Voice Tuesday discussion that now is part of my YouTube channel, which you can find there, Michael J. Lopez 9. That was my, coach. It's all about sports and identity. That was my football number. You can see there's a picture behind me. That's my son. Uh, Fortunately, he's 6'1", so that's great. He's number 11. And my best friend superimposed an image of me from college next to that
Wow.
same picture, and
That's really cool.
so I was number 9. So yeah, there's just special moments. But and then I've got a newsletter on my website that comes out every Friday that's tied to those conversations, insights from my book, and other resources around change. So yeah, appreciate everyone's support, and I'm really having a great time having these conversations and giving a platform to other people and being on platforms like yours. And in the famous words of Captain America, I can do this all day, right? I can talk about this as much as people want to. So
Right, right.
Fantastic. Michael Lopez up online in all of those links that we have down there in the show notes. So just scroll down and check out his book, check out his website, LinkedIn, a great place that Michael is too. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, today. We learned so much about change and excited to implement these strategies.
thanks, guys. I appreciate it.